Hi, my name is Briley Towle and I'm in Theater 190J online course, and this is my presentation for the history of theater. I tried to show my visual aid, but I'm going to try and screenshot them and put them down here as I go through and talk about it because the PowerPoint presentation, all the words were backwards. So starting off with Greek theater, on my little PowerPoint you'll see that it starts around 800 BC. And this all had to do with tragedy and comedy, and these were all forms of different Greek theaters. A lot of them were based upon the Greek gods, and a big part of this time period was the choral drama, and the playwrights actually wrote the chorus for all of these parts of the play, and this was considered to be an important part. The chorus was the group character and the mood and the narrator all in one, and that was kind of a unique point that I noticed with this time period. Moving on, there is the Roman theater, which was around 240 BC. A lot of things came from the Greeks, and as I noticed as I went along, a lot of things built off of each other in the timeline of theater. And so they took the structures and the plots from the Greeks, but they did not use the chorus or the musical aspect of it. And they eliminated the chorus altogether in comedies, but they used it somewhat in others. The first play was actually written by a Greek import that was produced in 240 BCE. On my PowerPoint, I have a couple of different playwrights and what they wrote, and they just used a lot of these for entertainment purposes. Next is medieval theater, which was 400 AD, around that time period. This was very, very religious. During this time period, in a lot of aspects of life, Catholicism actually shaped the way that people acted and thought around this time period. They say that this could have easily began in churches with a Bible story performance in Latin, which I thought was kind of interesting, and the earliest was actually about a visit of the three Marys to Jesus's empty tomb. And a lot of this just reinforced those biblical thinkings and thoughts and those teachings that people commonly went over in a church setting. Elizabeth I created laws to forbid these plays about religious material, which I thought was also a unique fact about this time period because of the first kind of instance of separation of church and state, and where they were really creating laws to push out religion in citizens' lives. Going next on is the Italian Renaissance, and this was about in 1400. And this had a lot of new philosophical and artistic developments during this time period. They say that a lot of the material in the plays became a lot more professional theater as they lost the church background. So this paved the way for William Shakespeare and a lot of the other big name playwrights. This also took a nice blended form from classical and medieval time periods. However, they still used a lot from Greek and Rome. So they just kind of threw a lot of components together to create new time periods and new elements, along with adding in new things. This is also the time of the beginning of the university wits of Thomas Kidd and Christopher Marlowe. They wrote different things. Some of the most famous ones during this time period was The Spanish Tragedy, The Jew of Malta, and Edward II. So they just kind of started new forming ideas and taking a lot of components from what they already had and incorporating into that. Next is the English Renaissance, which was around the time of 1590. And this is also called the Elizabethan England, or the Golden Age of theater. This is the time period that William Shakespeare really was able to shine through and transformed theater in England and the surrounding areas, what they know it today. It started around 1590. He used a lot of large casts and iambic pentameter and just a lot of things that theater before had never really seen or experienced. Some of his are Romeo and Juliet, A Midsummer's Night Dream, like what we saw in class, and Henry with different parts of that. Ben Jonson was also popular during this time period with Every Man and His Humor and Bartholomew Fair. Next, kind of shifting over, is French neoclassicism. In 1600, it had effects on Western Europe that lasted over 200 years, which I thought was kind of interesting that the book gave a clear description of how, like how long this is lasting, just because I noticed as I went through, like I said earlier, that a lot of these things just kind of like transpired and kind of like a snowball effect. It just kept rolling on and adding new things and taking out old. This was based on a lot of truths and that this is how things should go, and they followed a lot of rules. So there was like the 3 jhanas, the 3 unities, a 5-act form, the twofold purpose. A lot of these things were just implemented in that they stuck with. Next is the English Restoration drama in 1660. This actually came from the restoration of King Charles after 20 years of the Puritan control. So after 1660, there was new staging, and women were actually finally allowed in theater during this time period. Although, once the women were allowed in, rape scenes became more popular and breached rules. So they were just kind of using that in a sense. In France, King Louis XIII, along with some others, formed the French Academy. And the French Academy kind of went in and censored a lot of what was being played at that time. In 1636, they censored the Cid after it became popular and it broke the rules, or what they established was the rules. A lot of other people, as should be on my PowerPoint down here, also created a lot of other different plays that were also controversial during that time period. However, in the 18th century, Victor Hugo kind of challenged those rules with some of his work, and the rules actually loosened up a bit. In 1800, there was the melodrama, and this typically just means like a music drama. So this actually became an escapism of the social ills from the Industrial Revolution, and it had a lot of two-dimensional stock characters. So there was a villain, a hero, and a heroine, with a lot of music lying underneath it all. So the music was acting as an element that added in a lot of extra pieces and mood setting, all of that they didn't really use before in other time periods. Now today, this is more common in your TV and your film rather than in a theater setting. Next is realism in the 1900s. This also was used as an aspect to confront the social ills from the Industrial Revolution. A lot of these are used by like the social movement, so there's theories of evolution and other philosophies that really just contributed and were utilized by this element of theater. People like Charles Darwin really played a key role in all of these things because they tried to use the scientific method to find the truth in their work that they were creating and producing. Some examples are Ghosts in a Dollhouse, along with some others that I have on my PowerPoint. Next in the time period was also in the 1900s, the other isms. There was naturalism, and some of these examples are Miss Julie and the Governor's Lady. These were modified forms of realism in the Western world. In 1885, there was symbolism, which was the use of symbols to tell the truth. This is almost like a world of fantasy that they had created within the plays. Expressionism was established around 1910 in Germany, and it rebelled against the materialism of machine age. So if you notice, a lot of these isms are created as escapes from what had been going on. And this really focused on distortion, and there were just a lot of people that played a key role in all of these isms. Next is the postmodern drama. This kind of started in the 1950s, and it was influenced a lot by anti-realistic movements. One hallmark was really the de-emphasis of text. So in a lot of the Greek and English and Roman times, they would really emphasize what they were saying, and they just kind of took that away in this time period, so it was a lot more modern in how things would be like how it is today. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, Latinos, blacks, gays, lesbians, and others were finally getting into theater. They were finally being allowed in, so that kind of allowed the racial controversy to go away. And so, like now, someone who you might suspect would be a white person in a play is not. Whereas before, everybody would just be your stereotypical what they would suspect. So that happened in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And so these movements really shattered the expectations that they had. And that is all I have for my history assignment. Thank you.